Having said that, Klein had advanced to sequence 6 faceless of the seer pathway in the previous volume. The faceless's acting method was to play a role as a person and deeply integrate into that person's social circle. The acting principle was that you could play anyone, but you could only be yourself. And to advance to the next sequence, Klein had to consume the potion amidst the singing of mermaids. And these were the 2 main threads of Lord of the Mysteries Volume 3 Traveler. One was Klein going to the sea to find mermaids that could allow him to advance, and the other was Klein constantly playing other people on the sea to digest the faceless potion. The sea was a place full of opportunities and dangers, with countless mysterious legends and powerful and complex pirates, who were the 4 kings and 7 admirals. And the story of the traveler gradually unfolded as Klein maneuvered among many pirates. Klein boarded the steamship White Agate and left Backland. He used the alias German Sparrow because it was both safe and convenient for deep-level acting as a faceless. Deep-level acting referred to truly replacing a person, even being able to have prolonged contact with his relatives and friends without being discovered. And Jarman, the role Klein was playing, was a bounty hunter, a madman who wanted to go to sea to seek wealth through adventure. A few days later, Klein discovered that a pirate with a bounty of 3,000 pounds had boarded the ship. He was Danitz Blees, a sailor under Iceberg General, one of the 7 pirate admirals. Klein activated Creeping Hunger and walked towards him. The pirate Danitz instantly sensed it, turned his head to look at Klein. He felt like he was facing a deep abyss of madness and bloodthirst, a monster full of hunger. This was not the ability of a faceless, but the effect of Creeping Hunger. Danitz was so stiff with terror that he dared not move. Klein was only watching him, because he was worried that he was an internal accomplice of the pirate group. One evening, the ship sailed into Banzi Harbor. A wealthy merchant disembarked to sample the port's delicacies, while the captain went to the telegraph office to send a telegram. An hour passed, and the people still hadn't returned. Klein stood by the window, looking at Banzi Harbor, and said nothing. He had divined that there was hidden danger in the port, and the captain and others were in danger. Klein decided to go and rescue them, and disembarked into the port with his servant Danitz. At this moment, something in the restaurant suddenly flew towards the merchant's family and smashed onto the ground. Their eyes looked over, and they immediately let out terrified screams. It was a shriveled and moldy head. Immediately after, they saw light. The light descended from the sky, and the disgusting head melted away like snow. Looking up, Klein walked slowly from the depths of the fog and calmly said, "First go to the telegraph office, then return to the ship." The merchant's family closely followed behind him, brought the captain and others out, and returned along the original route. They walked for a while, when a middle-aged man suddenly emerged from the depths of the fog, staggering towards them. He was the bishop of the local church, affiliated with the Storm Church. The captain was about to step forward to help the bishop, but saw Klein take out a gold coin and murmur that he harbored malice. The gold coin flew up, then turned downwards and landed in Klein's palm, heads up. This indicated affirmation. The bishop stared straight at this scene, and suddenly a dark red light surged in his eyes. A gale suddenly erupted from his body, and the group of people was blown away by the wind, their bodies flying backwards, falling in all directions. Just as the hurricane was about to subside, 6 headless figures rushed out of the fog, charging towards the group. In this critical moment, Klein no longer held back. Creeping Hunger erupted. His body leaned back, his arms spread open, and his left hand immediately lit up with a brilliant light. A pure, scorching radiance descended from the sky and landed on the bishop, completely enveloping him. The bishop's body began to evaporate, first the epidermis, then the flesh and blood. A scream from the soul rang out. In just 2 or 3 seconds, only fragments of clothing remained on the ground. The battle ended, and Klein directly turned around, leading the group back to the ship. Most people at sea believed in the Storm Church, and most matters were also under the church's jurisdiction. The captain reported the incident to the Storm Church, and received a reply a few hours later that the matter had been resolved. He relaxed, and chatted with Klein about Banzi Harbor, inadvertently mentioning that when Banzi Harbor was anciently called Bensi. Klein's eyes suddenly constricted, and coldness spread from the depths of his bone marrow. He recalled a past experience. That day, in an underground ruin in Backland, Klein and Miss Sharon encountered an evil spirit. The evil spirit had been trapped in the underground ruin for over 2,000 years. He hoped that Klein and Sharon could help him get out of his predicament. The method was to find direct descendants of the Sauron family and the Medici family, and obtain their blood. When Klein indicated that he had never heard of the Medici family, the evil spirit was silent for a few seconds and slowly said, "Perhaps you can try your luck in Benzi." In other words, Banzi Harbor, or rather Benzi, was related to the Red Angle. Cold sweat streamed down Klein's back, and he had only one thought in his mind: report it quickly. At the Tarot gathering 2 days later, the world mentioned the anomaly in Banzi Harbor. The fool immediately responded, casually mentioning the Angel King Red Angel. Alger, the hanged man, indeed reported it to the church. But he then noticed that there was something fishy about the world's repeated remarks and boldly speculated that he was a fool's attendant. This speculation was also within Klein's plan. After all, as communication deepened, his identity would always be somewhat exposed. His plan was to disguise German as one of the fool's attendants, namely Mr. World of the Turret Club. A few days later, the Weitergett arrived at its destination. Danitz finally ended his pleasant servant career, only to find an uninvited guest in the room, the first mate of the Admiral of Blood, one of the 7 pirate admirals with a bounty of 6,000 pounds iron. The maritime forces were complex and intricate, with the 4 pirate kings and the 7 pirate admirals. Their relationships were not harmonious, and their subordinates often fought fiercely. Danitz, as a subordinate of Iceberg General, encountered the first mate of the Admiral of Blood, and instantly met with a storm-like attack, suffering heavy injuries. He tried his best to escape, but with fatal wounds, his life was rapidly draining away. The scene before his eyes was already swaying. Just as he could no longer hold on and fell backward, he saw Klein, and said intermittently, "Don't mind me, I'm dying. Help, tell the captain. Be careful of Admiral of Blood." Just then, he saw Klein reach out and wipe at the wound. The fatal wound instantly turned from his chest and abdomen to his arm. He was momentarily stunned and asked blankly, "Why not? Treat me first." Klein slowly spoke, his tone calm and unperturbed. "After you finish speaking, it's politeness." Danitz took a deep breath, glanced at Klein, who he obviously couldn't defeat, and squeezed out a smile. Klein and he then entered the inn and learned that the Admiral of Blood's pirate crew was engaged in arson, murder, and looting, committing all kinds of evil. Klein nodded slightly, pensive. Second mate Iron deserved to die and had a bounty of 6,000 pounds. To act as German, he could hunt. Danitz was entrusted to go to the bar to collect intelligence on Iron, but unexpectedly encountered Alger, the hanged man. The hanged man guessed that Danitz's partner was Mr. World, and Klein also guessed that Alger was the hanged man. The two then met offline to discuss hunting Iron. Under a clever plan, second mate Iron was lured to the designated location. Klein suddenly rushed out, successively using sacred light and spiritual piercing, suppressing Iron without any power to fight back. Taking advantage of his brief physical stiffness, Klein brushed past him on his right side and stuffed sun holy water into his body. The next moment, an explosion sounded, and crimson fire and light leaped. Iron's eyes went black, and he thumped and knelt to the ground. Klein killed the Admiral of Blood's second mate, Iron, and obtained his bounty. According to custom, he and Danitz went to visit the local forces and purchased extraordinary items there. These local forces were also known as the Resistance, who did not yield to foreign colonists and fought for independence, believing in the sea god, who appeared in the image of a giant sea serpent. When selecting extraordinary items, a strange thing happened. Just as Klein's finger touched a milky white ancient sword, despairing and painful roars echoed in his mind. Klein's pupils suddenly constricted, and he turned around and left. In the place he walked, countless fanatical sea god believers knelt and prostrated themselves on the ground, kissing his footprints while weeping. That's right, there was the sea god's soul in the ancient sword he touched, and it had now invaded his body. Klein hurriedly left and entered the gray fog space, easily clearing it away. He then reported the sea god matter to the Storm Church. The sea god could not find a way to survive and wanted to possess Klein, but failed, so he completely gave up. Instantly, dark clouds layered in the sky, and heavy rain poured down. The sea was turbulent with monstrous waves. This was the sea god in anger. He wanted to drag countless people to be buried with him. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in mid-air. The dark clouds dispersed, the heavy rain stopped, and the morning light shone down again. The one who intervened was the Sea King, Sequence 3 of the Storm Church. He naturally would not watch the sea god create disaster, and took action to suppress him. After the sea god died, Klein divined his hiding place and came to this place. At this time, the sea god was already dead, and his extraordinary characteristics had turned into a white scepter. As soon as Klein touched the scepter, images of decaying, praying sea god believers, and the resistance weeping without end, floated into his mind. This scepter condensed the extraordinary characteristics of the former sea god. Now, the holder of the scepter is the sea god. Possessing it can create tsunamis, raise hurricanes, produce heavy rain, bring lightning strikes, fly in the sky, and walk on the sea, almost without any restrictions. In addition, it can drive sea creatures and respond to believers' prayers. This is equivalent to the ruler of a sea area. This is a true god in the real sense. Klein was thoughtful. Faceless needed role-playing, and with the sea god scepter in hand, playing the sea god was perfect. At the Resistance headquarters, the sea god statue had already been broken. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the statue. He stepped on the waves surrounded by hurricanes. He held a white short staff in his hand and said in a deep voice, "I have returned." Sea god believers were in tears, prostrating on the ground, too excited to control themselves. This was Klain playing the sea god. He gave 10 divine mandates such as no human sacrifices, no indiscriminate killing. From then on, Mr. Fool had a new identity, sea god. Soon after, when Klain was writing a letter to Mr. Azik, looking at Mr. Azik's messenger, he suddenly also wanted a messenger of his own. So he lit a candle, completed the preliminary work of the ritual, and began to chant incantations. A figure emerged from mid-air. She had light golden hair, scarlet eyes, and a bright appearance. However, unlike humans, her neck was empty, and she held 4 identical heads in her hand. The headless woman's skirt moved slightly, and the 4 golden-haired, red-eyed heads nodded at the same time. "I am willing to be a messenger, 1 gold coin each time." Klain nodded in agreement. After the two signed a contract, Klain finally obtained his own messenger, the headless woman. A few days later, a deep red star in the gray fog space suddenly lit up. This meant that someone was reciting the Fool's honorific name, but she was not a current member of the Turok Club. The reciter's name was Katlia, Star Admiral of the 7 Pirate Admirals, Sequence 5 astrologer. At this time, she was suffering from the ravages of the Hidden Sage's whispers, and was about to lose control. In pain, she recited the Fool's honorific name. She was pulled by Klain into the Grey Fog space and joined the Turok Club, codenamed Hermit. Soon after, Klain accepted a commission to find someone, and learned of the whereabouts of a young woman named Irene. He learned that she had a relationship beyond friendship with Tracy, the Admiral of Disease, one of the 7 Pirate Admirals. Admiral of Disease was a Sequence 5 Pain Alchemist, a member of the Witch sect. Because he needed to act as a faceless, and because Admiral of Disease had done many evils, Klain planned to disguise himself and sneak onto the pirate ship to assassinate Admiral of Disease. That night, Klain disguised himself as the young woman Irene and was escorted back to the Admiral of Disease's ship. He was taken into the Admiral of Disease's room. Admiral of Disease smiled playfully, holding a whip in her left hand, and walked towards him step by step. "Tell me, how should I punish you?" Before the words finished, Klain's eyes suddenly lit up, and 2 bolts of lightning pierced towards her. Admiral of Disease froze in place. At the same time, the full-length mirror in the room shattered with a crack, scattering all over the floor. Klain's expression remained unchanged, and he turned and rushed towards the Admiral of Disease, who had used a doppelganger technique, his fists hammering down like iron hammers, forcing her to only parry. When she revealed an opening, Klain snapped his fingers. The next second, air bullets flew out, shooting towards her beautiful face. Admiral of Disease was not flustered. The darkness in her body surged out endlessly, completely enveloping him. Immediately afterwards, thick ice crystals condensed outside the darkness. Air bullets could not break through the ice crystal defense in a short time, and the witch's disease ability had quietly taken effect. Klain's throat itched, and he knelt on one knee, coughing violently. Admiral of Disease seized the opportunity and shouted loudly for help. Klain heard the shouting, and without hesitation, smashed through the window and jumped into the sea. The assassination mission failed. After escaping, Klain wrote a letter to Mr. Azik. Mr. Azik arrived that night and accompanied him back to the Admiral of Disease's ship, because the Admiral of Disease had news about death, which would help Mr. Zeke recover his memory. As soon as they entered the captain's room, a soft, beautiful female voice suddenly sounded. "It's you." The witch who spoke looked at Azik with a faint smile on her lips. She was a Sequence 3 Edgeless witch, and knew the amnesiac Messire Azik, because thousands of years ago, when Azik was Sequence 2 Death Consul, the primordial witch and Death collaborated to launch the Pale Disaster, fighting against the Evernight goddess. Later, other gods joined, and the primordial witch was severely wounded, and Death directly perished. And Messire Azik was the son of the former Death. The 2 demigods had a brief conversation, and then left the Admiral of Disease's ship. Because of the fierce battle with the Disease Admiral, Klain's body was affected by disease. He purchased medicine from a pharmacist belonging to the secret organization, the School of Life. He commissioned Klain to find his teacher, Roy King, for a reward of 100 pounds. In the evening, the demon Erodes was summoned by Klain and communicated with him through a wireless telegraph machine. "Great Master, I am here. Your humble and loyal servant Erodes, waiting to serve you." Klain inquired about Roy King's whereabouts and learned the truth, and he was shocked. It turned out that Roy King was related to disappearance of the Sequence 1 Mercury Serpent. This Mercury Serpent immediately reminded him of an unborn baby. The reincarnated Mercury Serpent Will Accepted, and Klain happened to have a paper crane folded by Mercury Serpent himself, so he used it to communicate with Mercury Serpent in a dream. The pharmacist got his teacher's whereabouts from Klain, and as instructed, took a dye. Just as he finished taking it, a carriage sped past. Startling him, his wrist trembled, and the dye fell to the ground. The dye rolled continuously, and finally stopped, with the red one facing up. Just as the pharmacist was about to pick it up, his body suddenly swayed, and he fell to the ground without obstacles, feeling dizzy. All of this was because of this dye, the probability dice. Its danger was comparable to a Grade Zor sealed artifact. the number of dots would affect the owner's luck. The pharmacist was in a cold sweat, feeling that he could not deliver the dice to the island his teacher mentioned, alive by himself. At this moment, he thought of German Sparrow, so he hired Klein for 1,000 pounds to be his bodyguard. Mercury Serpent told Klein through the paper crane that he could use effective means to scare the dice, so that it would become quiet for a certain period of time. Klein thought of the all-black eye, which contained the ravings of the true creator. He entered the restroom, locked the door, set up a ritual, and summoned himself to himself. He skillfully entered the dim light above the gray fog, and brought the probability dice close to the all-black eye. Klein, with a faint smile, picked up the probability dice, and politely bowed his head and asked, "You seem unwilling to listen. Very well, give me an answer. 6 points means cooperation, the rest represent refusal." After speaking, he tossed the probability dice upwards, and then stretched out his palm to catch it. The milky white die fell straight down, quickly rolled a circle, and let the bright red 6 points face upwards. In this way, the die succumbed to Klein's gentleness, and was well behaved along the way. Through this commission, not only did he get a 1,000 pound commission fee, but he also gained the friendship of the secret organization, the School of Life. Later, he learned about the Adventurers Mutual Aid Society, and accepted the president's commission to play the role of a rear admiral, a true demigod. Because he needed to deal with a secret matter that could not be known to others, he had to have a stand, and to handle daily affairs, and deal with his mistresses. This was a good opportunity to act as a faceless, and Klein immediately agreed. Acting began. That night, the rear admiral's mistress came to Klein's room. The mistress, wearing only a silk robe, walked out. Her golden hair hung down slightly disheveled, and her lips seemed to open and close, appearing extremely seductive in the dim and ambiguous environment. The neckline of the silk robe was very low, and snow-white skin and cleavage simultaneously entered Klein's eyes. Klein's heart was surging, but his mouth was very calm. "I have many things to deal with tonight. You don't have to wait for me." The mistress nodded disappointedly, returned to the room, took out a necklace from under the pillow, and clenched it in her palm. She stood there and whispered a prayer. "Great Mother Tree of Desire, please make me more charming, so that he can experience the ultimate pleasure from me, and give me a child." The first day passed smoothly. On the evening of the second day, when he returned home, Klein made up another reason to avoid intimacy with the mistress. That night, he dreamed of every beautiful woman he had ever seen, passionately entwined with them in various ways. Suddenly, Klein woke up with a start. Why would I have such a dream? He suspected that he was being influenced by extraordinary powers, and cautiously got out of bed. Outside the door, servants were devouring all kinds of food, their bulging stomachs trembling, as if they would burst at any moment. A maid next to them was fast asleep, and even if someone pinched her neck, she still wouldn't wake up. Their desires for eating and sleeping were magnified to the maximum, just like Klein's lust. In fact, the entire manor was now bizarrely abnormal. Everyone's desires were distorted and magnified, terrifying and horrifying. Klein's scalp tingled, and he wanted to turn around and flee, reporting to the church. But the most powerful person on the island was the rear admiral he was playing. He took a deep breath, and then pushed open the half-closed door of the master bedroom. Groans of unrestrained pleasure entered his ears, and a heart-racing scent drilled into his nostrils. On the bed was a white body 3 meters tall. On its surface, there were tree-like brownish-green fluids, some of which had cracked and turned into flower-like organs. Just then, a head at the top of that terrifying body turned around. It was the mistress. Her cheeks were flushed, and she said shyly, "Admiral, I want to have a child with you." Klein's hair stood on end. He opened his arms, and instantly, a bright pillar and lined with holy flames descended from mid-air, enveloping the monster that had collapsed into flesh and blood. His head and remains melted at a visible speed, obtaining final purification. Klein slightly curled the corner of his mouth, and let out a bitter chuckle. What a crazy and chaotic world. In fact, the matter behind this involved the god, the Mother Tree of Desire. She was targeting Klein. This was not surprising. Because of the law of Beyonder characteristics aggregation, Klein was often drawn into events involving high-sequence powerhouses. After this incident, the Faceless Potion was further digested. When advancing to Sequence 5, in addition to taking the potion, a corresponding ritual was also required. For example, for a Sequence 6 Faceless to advance to Sequence 5 Marionettist, the ritual was to consume the potion amidst the singing of mermaids. So, the world of the Tarot Gathering entrusted Admiral of Stars, Hermit Catlia, to take him on her ship to a certain dangerous sea area to find mermaids, for a reward of 3,000 pounds. Several days later, the ship entered a mysterious sea area, the Sea of Ruins. This was a battlefield left over from the Battle of the Gods, full of endless dangers. High-sequence Beyonders would hear the ravings of the true creator here, while low-sequence Beyonders would die easily. Once night fell, everyone had to fall asleep, otherwise they would disappear. After falling asleep, Everyone would enter the same dream, but it was difficult to stay awake. Here, Klain saw the former Giant King's court, the Angel of Fate Uriel, and Anderson, the strongest hunter below demigod, trapped in the Sea of Ruins. After leaving the dream, Anderson paid a certain price and boarded the Admiral of Stars' ship, wanting to escape this sea area. But he had already been cursed, and his luck would become very bad, and even some daily trivial matters could affect his life. Next, Klain and his companions encountered Hell Admiral's Black Tulip. This strongest of the 7 pirate admirals suddenly launched round after round of bombardment on the Admiral of Stars' ship. Klain used the effect of a talisman to fly above his ship. The next moment, on the Black Tulip, circling wraiths rushed towards him. Klain was unhurried, reached into his pocket with his left palm, took out Azek's copper whistle and threw it out. The wraiths unhesitatingly turned their bodies and rushed towards the copper whistle, desperately. In an instant, only Hell Admiral was left on the deck. Hell Admiral opened a bronze door. Inside the door, skinless, bloody arms stretched out, and cyan black vines with baby faces extended out. Hands covered in teeth grabbed out, screaming and laughing. Klain's body was uncontrollably sucked towards the bronze door. Hell Admiral seized this opportunity to draw out a thin sword from his waist, and swiftly pierced Klain like lightning. However, Klain's figure quickly withered and became a piece of thin paper. It was the life-saving skill, paper figurine substitute. In mid-air, Klain had jumped out from another direction. Just then, a ball of crimson, white fire flew over, smashing the bronze door and making it shake constantly, its color also becoming dim. Klain's helper, the strongest hunter Anderson, finally arrived. Hell Admiral immediately controlled the ship to escape. After resolving the danger, the ship set sail again. In a certain dream, Klain encountered an unexpected person, Roselle the Great's eldest daughter, the mysterious queen of the 4 Parrot Kings, Bernadette, the person behind Hermit. Through the information revealed by Hermit, Bernadette believed that Klain was a favored one of the Fool, and grasped the way to interpret Roselle the Great's self-created writing system. She hoped that he could teach her Chinese. Klain naturally did not agree. A few days later, the ship finally encountered mermaids. Klain consumed the potion amidst the singing and advanced to Sequence 5, Marionettist. The new extraordinary abilities were all related to spirit body threads. By manipulating spirit body threads, he could slow down the target's thinking, stiffen their body, and make their movements sluggish. Over time, the marionettist could completely turn the target into his own puppet, and operate from behind the scenes within a certain distance, manipulating the other party to fight. In this way, the puppet could use its original extraordinary abilities. This ability was mysterious and terrifying, so it was praised as one of the most difficult abilities to deal with below high sequence. After the advancement was completed, Klain disembarked on an island. Afterwards, he ran into the second mate of the Undying King, one of the 4 Parrot Kings, a Sequence 5 powerhouse, in a bar, and beheaded him, skillfully exchanging him for a bounty, and taking away the extraordinary characteristics sucked out of the corpse to feed creeping hunger. On the other side, Blaise Danitz was horrified to discover that the captain, Iceberg General, had disappeared. There was no trace of her left in every corner of the ship. Helpless, he wrote a letter to the adventurer German Sparrow. After receiving the letter, Klain and the strongest hunter Anderson went to the Admiral of Stars' ship. Klain entered the captain's room and observed carefully. His gaze instantly noticed the book in the center of the desk, The Adventures of Groselle. Klain carefully read through it. Combining many clues, he quickly made a bold guess. Iceberg General had entered the book and become a character in the story. To get her out of the book and back to reality, he had to kill the Frost Dragon in the story. To this end, Klain took risks and brought Danitz into the book story as well. In this process, Danitz became the first blessed of the Fool. The two trudged forward in a Blisson and found Anderson and Iceberg General, and encountered the past owners of this book, the Giant Guardian, the Elf Singer at Sever. Here, Klain learned more secret knowledge about the Angel Kings. After a fierce battle, everyone killed the Frost Dragon and returned to the real world. Unexpectedly, these beings who had lived in the book for countless years rapidly aged, and died after returning to the real world. Klain collected their ashes, and planned to send them back to their hometown for burial. Klain and Iceberg General returned to the captain's room. Iceberg General established a deep friendship with him and gifted The Adventures of Groselle as a reward. When she learned that he was going to Bayam, she offered to accompany him. During the journey, the two often stayed alone in the captain's room, discussing various occult knowledge. One day, Iceberg General looked at Klain and was about to say something when she suddenly realized that the Golden Dream had already reached its destination. Afterwards, with Anderson's help, Klain spent £9,000 to purchase a handgun with extraordinary characteristics. Its ability was to reap the lives of enemies. Each shot fired was ringing a death knell for the enemy, hence the name Death Knell Pistol. This trip had seen him advance to Sequence 5 Marionettist. The next step was naturally to find the Sequence 4 Bizarreness Sorcerer Potion formula. Cleen summoned the magic mirror and learned of 3 ways to obtain the formula. First, find the Sequence 1 Bizarreness sorcerer Charlie Theron who had gone mad. Second, search for the Antigonus family treasure. Third, obtain a sealed artifact from the Evernight Church headquarters in Backland, the Antigonus family notebook. The Evernight Church was the Orthodox church that Cleen had joined when he first transmigrated, and that notebook was also closely related to him, having an inseparable connection. After thinking it over, he felt that the third method was the most feasible, and decided to return to Backland later. Early the next morning, Cleen was walking in the woods when a leaf suddenly fell. Its speed suddenly accelerated, and it turned strangely, sticking to the tip of his nose and mouth, firmly covering Cleen's nose and mouth, making it completely impossible for him to breathe. At the same time, the branches of the surrounding trees broke off, shooting towards Cleen like sharp swords. Even the surrounding debris had its own vitality, connecting together and turning into an airtight strange net, pouncing over in an instant. Every leaf, every blade of grass around him wanted to put him to death. The attacker was a Sequence 4 puppet demigod sent by the Mother Tree of Desire. Cleen's body suddenly collapsed and thinned, turning into a paper figurine substitute. Cleen emerged from a distance without hesitation, took out his harmonica and played it, paying a price of £10,000 to ask Miss Messenger for help. Cleen discovered another enemy not far away, Admiral of Blood, one of the 7 paired admirals. Creeping hunger erupted. From Cleen's mouth he uttered demonic words full of filth. Soon Admiral of Blood's body stiffened, and his movements slowed. The next moment, ice ceiling began to spread from Admiral of Blood's toes, turning him into a complete ice sculpture. What followed was spiritual piercing. Admiral of Blood's mind felt like it was being drilled into by a knife point, and pain spread throughout his body, causing him to briefly lose his sanity. Just as he regained consciousness, he heard another word that made him despair: slow. Then, without a doubt, he endured ice sealing and spiritual piercing again. Cleen firmly controlled him and began to secretly manipulate spirit-body threads. When the time came, Admiral of Blood was controlled, but the battle was far from over. Afterwards, the situation became even more chaotic, but Mr. Azek arrived again in time and brought him to escape. After this battle, Marionettist Cleen gained an extremely precious marionette, Admiral of Blood. Afterwards, he disguised himself as Don Dantis and returned to Backland as a wealthy merchant. The first thing he did upon returning here was to go to the cemetery to bury the ashes of lone soldier Roncesvalles Edwards, who had fought alongside him in the book. Cleen took a step back and stared deeply for a while, inscribing on the tombstone, "Every journey has an end." Thus concludes Lord of the Mysteries Volume 3 Traveler.